Gyles, thank you for coming to my kitchen today.
I'm excited to be here, and I'm going to have my first sip of your tea.
Oh, that's
Tea
a
is
beautiful
everything
tea.
to me now because I've given up coffee.
Why have you given up coffee?
Acid reflux. I know it's a bit personal
Yeah.
to start on such a personal note. Partly acid reflux, and also partly because I've got into a kick of giving up things.
Yeah, I'm worried about you.
I've given up alcohol, I've given up coffee, I've given up meat, I've given up fish, I've given up rice, pasta, potato, biscuits, cakes, kebabs. Only, well, not all kinds.
See, I bought you a present. I buy all my guests a
Oh, how
present.
lovely! What? But maybe.
You've probably given it up, though.
Oh, what is it? How lovely!
It's expensive chocolate.
Oh, that's fine. I mean, that's my one weakness, and I love it. And I'm writing a book at the moment. Oh, these are expensive chocolates. Oh, I love chocolates. Thank you very, very much.
It's because I know you don't drink, and I was reading your book, which we'll discuss in a minute. The 7 Secrets of Happiness, and in your book, you say about eating is one of the things that can bring someone happiness. And excuse me for being rude here, looking at my phone, but I'm trying to set the stopwatch to see how long we're going for.
Oh, must.
Timing
is everything.
Don't want to get too boring, do we? But
I mean, I was setting mine, and it said tweets aren't loading, so nobody's watching, nobody knows we're on, but it doesn't really matter. It says please tap to retry. So here we are. we're retrying. But then this is what life is now like.
is, yeah.
We could actually have a conversation just looking down at our screens. I earn most of my living speaking at functions.
yeah.
And I go to gala dinners at grand places in Park Lane. It's at the Dorchester twice this week. And I go around the tables, and there's fantastic food, black tie events, wine, 4-course meals, really beautiful food. And I find the younger people, sitting at the tables, all looking at their screens.
Yeah.
At a slap-up dinner.
I know.
It's heartbreaking. So let's put that aside.
The
Let's talk to
one that I found most disturbing was I went to a basketball game, and in front of me were Little Mix, the band Little Mix,
Yeah.
who you probably got all their songs, haven't you, Charles?
Given to me personally by them.
Okay.
In the old days, they would actually give you an album. Now
Right.
they just offer you a download.
Download, yeah.
Which sounds a bit doubtful. You know. Would you like my download, Little Mix?
So I'm sitting second row, and Little Mix and their boyfriends are front row. I don't know who their boyfriends are, but they are front row on a basketball court, and they are it's the two American teams come over, these huge, great big giants playing. It's a fantastic spectacle. I do like basketball, but I'm sitting so close to the event. They are watching the game through their phones, and after 5 minutes I was amused by it. By about 15 minutes I was like, I'm so angry about this. They're there in front of you and you're busy filming it and looking at your phone. This is nuts.
I know. Well, I went to see the stage production of Titanic 18 months ago during the World Cup.
Don't tell me the ending.
I won't tell you what happens. There's a big song. It's an anthem. But in the front row were a whole group of guys who were following the World Cup on their screens.
Yeah, I can. That's
and they
acceptable.
were cheering at most inappropriate moments. It really was. It was heartbreaking.
That's acceptable. Now, so can you
Yes.
eat chocolate?
I can eat
Okay,
chocolate,
good.
and I will enjoy it.
You probably-
And I am working on a book at the moment, and I give myself a reward probably every 200 words, and it'll be one of your chocolates.
Perfect. But I'm worried about the insides. I think one of the insides is coffee. So don't eat that one. Give that to...
No, I can have. It's just liquid coffee. I don't know.
Right.
Just breaking the habit, and also simplifying life. I like it to be simple.
But why are you giving up so much at the moment? Why is this happening?
One of the reasons is simplicity. Now what I do when I go to a restaurant, and I very much like eating out, I eat out a lot of my life, I simply, my wife orders, and then when she's ordered, I say, well, I'll have what she's having. And that's, I don't even ask. And I prefer to go to restaurants that aren't vegetarian restaurants because what they've got for veggies is very limited, and I just have whatever the veggie option is. I like to keep it really simple. I'm tired of thinking things through like that.
Yeah, see, I sort of agree with you in that, and I've thought about doing this, and it's sort of slightly happening where I want just a uniform to wear every day, and I've discussed it with a few people where all I do is wake up every day and I think that's what I'm wearing.
Absolutely.
And if it's just, I wear a lot of just black t-shirts and jeans.
It's very stylish, can I say? And you've got the figure for it. You look very, very good. Do you wax?
Oh, often. I don't
No,
know.
that was just incidental.
I'm not
For
sure
those who
what
are
I would be
regular
waxing.
viewers, I believe they haven't found that out yet. So I was just trying to tease the information from you. No, people, actually a lot of people like a uniform. I saw a few years ago at the Richmond Theatre, my wife and I, we went to see a production of a poem by Milton, great famous poem by Milton called Paradise Lost. It's a great mighty work by this amazing 17th century poet John Milton. And I thought, well, I tried to read it when I was young. It's about Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And I thought, well, we'll go and see it. It's going to be performed for us. They're going to do the words of Milton. We sat down. The theatre was virtually empty. We were in the front row. And the lights went down, the curtain went up. And then we realized, of course, it's set in the Garden of Eden. And there were Adam and Eve, stark naked. We were in the front row, in the absolute front row. And there they were, giving their all. And they moved about quite a bit. And as the man said, you know, the trouble with naked dancing is that not everything stops when the music stops. Anyway, there they were, speaking these great lines by Milton. And the point of the story is this. It's a great poem. And we watched and we listened, and gradually we were completely caught up with it. And at the end, Adam and Eve are turned out of the Garden of Eden. And when they were turned out, they went to the edge of the stage where there were 2 suitcases. And they opened their suitcases and they got into everyday clothes.
Ah, poignant.
And that was the shocking bit. And then seeing them in their uniforms for life suddenly diminished them.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
So we should all just go naked?
No. Can I say we should not go naked? Very few of us, I'm afraid, have got what it takes. You probably have. Now I've heard about the waxing. Sadly, I don't have and never did.
Has Naked Martin on Twitter caught your attention yet?
No, and won't be.
You just all right. Can I just tell all the listeners? Do not look up Naked Martin on Twitter. I'm telling you, do not look it up.
Certainly, if you hope to be a member of Parliament or are a member of Parliament, do not look it up. You will be arrested, and quite soon.
It's this guy who just dances around naked.
And we don't want it. We don't want it. We don't need it.
He's
and
funny.
I'll tell you the reason that I don't need to see it is that probably before you were born, we'll discover how old you are in a minute. Probably before you were born, I saw everything. Because when I was young, in my 20s, I was invited by a man called Lord Longford, the Earl of Longford, famous in his day. He was a Labour cabinet minister. He'd been in Clement Attlee's government after the Second World War. Later, he was in Harold Wilson's government. He was a good man, a saintly man, Frank Longford, a prison reformer, prison visitor, devoted prison visitor, a bit of a frost at parties, it has to be admitted, chiefly because he liked to bring Myra Hindley with him. Other than that, you couldn't really say a thing against this good and saintly soul.
Wow.
He was a very forgiving and good man,
right,
interested in prison reform. And in the 1970s, he launched a campaign to rid the world of the scourge of pornography.
Oh.
And he invited me to be the youngest member of his pornography committee. I genuinely was a member of this pornography committee. I still have the raincoat I bought at the time. And this is a true story. You can check this out. And I joined this committee. It wasn't just me and Lord Longford. There was a bishop, there was an archbishop, there was a rabbi, and of course there was Cliff Richard. And we...
Was there really Cliff Richard?
Genuine. This is all for real, all in the public domain, features in my published diaries. But the point of the story is that we went on a pilgrimage to Copenhagen to reap the alien porn. I went with Lord Longford. I was in my early 20s. We went on an aeroplane. I remember he read the Bible all the way. We got out the other end, and we were given, I think, £5 by the British ambassador to Copenhagen to spend in the porn clubs, the porn shops, the porn places in Copenhagen.
Sex shops.
The sex shops. Thank you, that's the phrase. And so we went round and we saw, the point is, I've seen it all. I've seen every naked body I need to see. I've seen the live intercourse. I've seen, I'm sorry to say, bestiality.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Anything went.
Right.
Anything went and everything went. Lord Longford, I was with him. He was my chaperone. I remember he walked out of the first place because there was a sort of naked girl who was descending. I mean, he was in his 70s. And he had hair sort of sticking out here with bald on top. And she was coming towards him with her whip and was sort of teasing the top of his head. And he could see that, she was going to end up in his lap. And he quickly made his excuses and left, saying he'd seen enough for science and more than enough for entertainment. But it was an interesting experience. And what is curious, too, is that at the time he was much mocked as a do-gooder, as a killjoy, as a Puritan. But now I think we would probably agree with him. Then he was dubbed Lord Porn, and it was front page news. He was made a figure of fun. But in fact, probably now we think, actually, pornography, it is exploiting other people. Is it reducing people to, it takes love out of relationship. It's not attractive, not a good thing. Anyway, so the point is, I've had my fill.
I've done
of naked strangers.
I've done a podcast with John Ronson, who did a whole series of podcasts about the porn industry. It's a complicated subject, that, because obviously there's some people who like doing it and they make a lot of money from it, and there's one guy who makes an absolute fortune out of it. He's the one who put it all free online. Anyway, it's interesting. What's it called, Mark? That can you remember? Oh, it's called the Butterfly Effect. Butterfly Effect.
If people want to read our account, my account of what happened during the Longford committee, in my one, I published a couple of volumes of diaries. One's called "Something Sensational to Read in the Train." It's a quotation from Oscar Wilde's play "The Importance of Being Earnest," and there is an account of the times we had. Okay. Us gathering, sitting in solemn circles, flicking through these revolting magazines, sitting there hour after hour, going, the bishop, the archbishop, the rabbi,
but were you all turned on? I mean, not together, sitting there, but was I mean, that's the idea of porn, is to turn you on. Were you sitting there aroused, Charles?
No, because of the circumstances, I think. With the rabbi on one side, Cliff on the other, it was not conducive to the erotic charge. I'll be candid with you.
Right,
But my account of it is a bit of a turn on in comic terms, but not in sexy ones.
All right, I've read your book, by the way, The 7 Secrets of Happiness.
Yeah.
Because when I asked you to come on the podcast, I did say we do a lot of sort of self-helpy type things, and I started off as an agony uncle. I've read it, and we'll talk about this later. I've got to say, it's a brilliant read.
Thank you.
I'm not the best reader in the world, but I picked it up. I have to read a lot of books for this podcast because I do it, and I'm sort of enjoying it, but I get distracted. I picked this up and I read it in one sitting. It's such a lovely book. It really is.
You.
So we'll discuss a bit later. But first of all, get to know you a bit better, because I was thinking to myself, I was saying Gyles Brandreth on the podcast. I go, what's he do actually? I was like, actually, I really don't know.
What does he do?
What is your job?
What is my job? What is interesting? I'm a self-employed person. I'm a freelance and have always been. In the freelance world, we have a saying, life's a pitch and then you die. And I have been pitching since I was a teenager.
Right.
I've earned my living since I was a teenager in much the same way. One of the problems with me is there's been no development. My wife will tell you that. I am as I was when I was 16. And when I was 16, 17, 18, I first began speaking in public for money. During my gap year, I went to America, and between leaving school and going to university, I had a gap year. People used to in those days. I went to America, found myself teaching at a school as a job, and was invited to speak to a girls' school in Baltimore, Maryland. And it was 1,000 girls and 150 nuns. Mm-hmm. My kind of crowd. And I have to say, it went remarkably well. Word got out. I was then invited to a teachers' conference in New York, and as a result of that, I traveled all over America when I was still a teenager, speaking with my English accent, being an amusing Englishman in America, aged 19, talking about the swinging 60s, because it was the swinging 60s, and I had met the Beatles.
Uh-huh.
That was my calling card, because my parents I lived in Baker Street in London, and the Beatles had a shop called the Apple Shop in Baker Street, and I went there, and there were the Beatles. So I'd met the Beatles. So I talked about that. And then when I was at university, I went to Oxford University, I became president of the Union, the debating society there, and as a result of that, a number of the debates were put on television, so I appeared on TV. And then 50 years ago, literally 50 years ago, in 1969, while I was still a student, I had my own TV show called Child of the 60s on ITV on a Saturday night. I would sit on a stool, very much like this. It was quite novel then to sit on a stool. And I interviewed the great and the good of the day. And the first show we had Michael Foot, went on to be the leader of the Labour Party. Ian MacLeod went on to be Conservative Chancellor of the Exchequer. We had Lady Longford, married in fact to Frank Longford, the man I mentioned a moment ago. Anyway, the show went well. And as a result of that, somebody got in touch with me called Cyril Fletcher. Cyril Fletcher ran an agency for speakers, very fruity voice. He ended up appearing on That's Life with Esther Ranson. I introduced them. And he'd been famous in the 1930s.
I remember him.
Do you remember him?
Yeah,
For
That's
speaking
Life,
odd
yeah.
odes. He's the That's Life man. He'd been famous since the 1930s. And he was my sort of age, the age I am now, when I was about 20. And he took me under his wing, and I became the youngest person on the Associated Speakers books. And I remember going 50 years ago to the Dorchester Hotel, where I'm speaking this week twice, to an event where all the speakers were herded into the room, and we had labels with our prices on. There was gold, there was silver, there was bronze, and then there was newbies like me, green. And you could book me for £30. You could get me as a speaker for £30, which is quite a lot of money
was
in
that
those
good?
days.
Yeah.
The big speakers were people like George Burns, who was internationally famous. There were lots of senior statesmen, retired politicians. Field Marshal Montgomery was one of the speakers. Big stars, glamorous people like Diana Dawes. They were the speakers, and there were people like me. So I began on the speaking circuit then. So when I was still at university, I was doing all this speaking. I was doing a TV show. I did my first radio broadcast for Woman's Hour 50 years ago. And I also began as a journalist. There was a magazine called Honey, which was for young women. And they got in touch with me, and I became a kind of agony uncle, but also a guy who kept a diary called Luke Jarvis. And there was a photograph of a male model looking a bit like a younger version of you, who was
Giles.
Luke.
Thank you.
I wrote the words. So essentially, from the age of 19, I've been a freelance. And so over the years, I've always done the same thing. I basically worked.
And the thing which links it all is language.
Yeah.
That's your love, isn't it?
Yes. Language is power. Language is what
yeah.
defines us.
I had this discussion with you when you did Sunday Brunch the other day. You do enjoy doing so. What an impact you had this time round. I mean, you always have a great impact, but this time was off the scale, wasn't it? Everyone loved it, especially.
I love it. The 3 or 4 times I've been on, it's my favorite, truly my favorite television program, because A, it's very relaxed. 2, you are both very generous as hosts. You are there to, as it were, enjoy the company of your guests, not to dominate. You let them, when you bring them out when they need bringing out, you let them roll when they're wanting to roll. It's fun. We all like food. It's freewheeling too. There's time to relax.
That's it. It's 3 hours.
I just love that show.
Well, from the other side of it, from the presenter side, when we know we've got you booked or someone like Bradley Walsh or someone like that, we know are going to come alive on the show. It's fantastic because you've got to do your job, but we're doing it for 3 hours. I can just hand half the show over to you, basically. Here you go, Giles. Just make us laugh because that's what you're great at doing. So it's great.
But I do love words. I do love language for a variety. I mean, language is fundamental. I did a book this last year that's been a bit of a bestseller called "Have You Eaten Grandma?" It's about punctuation, spell. Well, obviously, "Have you eaten grandma?" with the comma or without the comma makes all the difference. And it's because everything is about language in a sense. You can communicate with a hug or even with an emoji. But language is what you really... when I was writing the book, I got a team of young people together to talk about how they're using language now. Because though I have children and grandchildren, I thought, I want to see how people in their early 20s are using language. And when we met up, it was around the time of Valentine's Day. So I said, love letters. Who writes a good love letter? Who gets a good love letter? Not one of these 8 young people had ever received or sent a love letter. One of them actually thought it was a kind of contraceptive. I said, no, I think you're thinking of French letters. He said, I've never heard of French letters. He said, love letters, aren't they? I said, no. Love letters are things you write. He had no idea. And a girl looked totally bemused. Oh, I think it's a bit creepy, I said, really? I mean, if somebody fancies you, how do they let you know? Well, she said, send me a smiley face. And I said, if you fancy them back, what do you do? I send them a smiley face. And I said, if you really fancy them, what do you do? She said, a smiley face with the tongue hanging out. I said, oh. And if he fancies you in return, what does he send you? She said an aubergine. Don't go there. Well, it is a language of sorts, and it is fun.
Yeah, it is. I like
But
emojis.
Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? It's just a beautiful poem. And if somebody sent you that handwritten, it is amazing.
Plagiarism it is.
It is plagiarism.
Yeah.
But can I tell you a gift? I'll slip this into your podcast. And this is giving away something very, very valuable indeed. If you want to be successful as a wooer, on the first or second date,
Yeah.
when you're chatting up whoever you're chatting up,
Yeah.
find out in passing, say to them, what's your favourite poem? Actually, do you have a favourite poem? Do you, Tim, have a favourite out of interest?
No.
You don't?
No.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I don't, I've discussed it on the podcast. I don't really understand. Get poetry. Doesn't move me.
Are you into girls?
Yeah.
Fine. So, most of the girls you know, because I've met one or two of them, I didn't know you were into them because they don't mention you, but I do know that you knew them. They may have a favourite poem.
Yeah.
And if they do, this is the trick. You find out about it at date 2. Mm-hmm. And then on date 4, you say, I've got something for you. Mm. And then over the coffee, you recite the poem to them by heart.
Ah.
That's a gift.
I've been busy sending dick pics, and I haven't really.
Yeah,
I haven't
exactly.
really done.
Do you know that's the one? I know you haven't, because you're not a total fool.
I've never sent one in my life.
And you do know that is the real turn-off. That's the one thing they really don't want, because they've got a library of bigger and better.
Naked Martin. What I was saying to you on the that's a good idea though. I like that idea. I might try it.
I think it's a bit late in your case. Stick with the waxing and the dick pics. I'm so sorry about this. It's a shame to be losing the audience so quickly when it was going so well. There may be on a different channel an edited version of this in which the interviewer is cut out. Who knows?
I was saying to you at Sunday brunch though, I get so frustrated, and when I listen to
I can tell you get so frustrated. Can I tell you, it's only frustrated men who feel the need to talk about dick pics. Normal, healthy men with active lives, they're not obsessing about it. It doesn't even crop into their heads.
When you get desperate.
But you could not wait to get those words out, dick pics, with a kind of relish slavering at the lips. Anyway, carry on.
Well, I was saying to you, I think at the end of the show on ad break or something, when I listen to someone like yourself or Stephen Fry, I get so frustrated because your command of the English language is so wonderful. Your vocabulary is so vast. Mine's limited. And I'm often, as the listeners of this podcast or tell you, I'm desperately searching for words often, whereas they're all there at your fingertips to use constantly. And I just think, if only I had more language.
You are never searching for words, but yes, language is fun. And I do. And in fact, speaking of podcasts, soon I shall be launching a rival podcast to yours with my friend Susie Dent.
Oh.
Do you know Susie?
Yes, I've interviewed her a couple of times. She's lovely.
She's lovely. She's highly intelligent. She's brilliant. I got to know her through being in Dictionary Corner on Countdown over many years. And she knows more words than you or I do put together. And she knows the history of words. She's fascinated by language. And we're going to do a podcast about basically extending your vocabulary, exploring words and language, because language is power. It's the one thing that differentiates us from the animals and those whose hands do trail upon the ground. As the philosopher Bertrand Russell said, no matter how eloquently a dog may bark, he cannot tell you that his parents were poor but honest. Only words can do that. You need words. And the better you use words, there's lots of research out on this, the better your CV will read, the better the job you'll get.
It's using them correctly as well, because the way you come on Sunday brunch and everybody loves it. You're fluid and it's beautiful to listen to.
Fluent, I think is what you mean.
Fluid, yeah. But you're
fluid. We're back to those dick pics. I'm afraid the man has got an obsession.
It's wonderful, but you're not just picking out random words and putting them into a sentence to make yourself look good. I know a word you don't. It's communication skills. Isn't it?
I'm very blessed in that I had a very, very happy childhood.
Yeah.
And I had two excellent parents. My mother was a teacher, and she specialized in teaching young children with reading difficulties. She was a pioneer of teaching people with dyslexia. So she loved words and language and took it very seriously and helped people. My father was a lawyer. an old school lawyer, born in 1910, virtually an Edwardian. And he loved, even when I was a small boy, he would tell me stories of the courtroom lawyers, the people like Mr. Justice Burkitt, who would, faced with the man in the dock who said, as God is my judge, I'm innocent. And Mr. Justice Burkitt leant forward and said, he isn't, I am, and you're not. My father was brought up in Liverpool. I come from the northwest, and my father was brought up in Liverpool, and the big lawyer in those days, in his part of the world, was a man called F.E. Smith, became the first Earl of Birkenhead, famous lawyer, F.E. Smith. My father, I remember telling me the case where F.E. Smith was prosecuting this, pointing to the man in the dock, saying, the accused now standing in the dock, at the time of the alleged offence, the accused now standing in the dock was as drunk as a judge. At which point the judge intervened to say, I think you'll find, Mr. Smith, the expression is as drunk as a lord. As your lordship pleases.
Good, yeah.
So my father loved words and word play. And people like him, born in 1910, that's before radio, before television, before the talking pictures. So their entertainment was literally reading and reciting.
Yeah.
My father had reams of poetry in his head. He and his brother and sisters, they would be around the parlor piano singing songs together, performing to one another, playing games with one another. That's what it was. You made your own entertainment. And lots of research has been done on watching TV. And it's up to a certain amount, 3 hours can do you good because you're actually receiving messages. But it's a passive reception. If you're actively engaged because you're communicating through words and language and doing things, it's better for you, better for the synapses. And I'm working on a book at the moment all about this, so I'm sort of rather full of that, on how the memory works, how the brain works, how we can delay dementia, how we can bring up do you have children?
Yes.
How we can bring up our small children to speak better, read better, write better, use the language more fully. So it's very, very exciting. And I had the blessing of parents of a generation where they did it automatically because they didn't have anything else. That's how they were brought up.
Yeah. Going back to Countdown quickly, when they do the words and then they go to Susie and say, could they do better? Is there a computer?
Yes.
Okay.
There used to be. When I began, I came to Countdown right at the beginning. I went up there at the suggestion of Kenneth Williams. The program began in 1983, something like that.
Yeah, you talk about Kenneth Williams in your book. He was a good friend of yours.
He was a good friend, a really lovely, hilarious man, the best company imaginable. Anyway, Kenneth was very kind to me, befriended me, and introduced me to Just a Minute, where I now appear regularly, introduced me to Countdown, and I'm the longest serving person who's been on Dictionary Corner. Thanks, both instances, to Kenneth, and we worked together on books, and we had a lot of fun together. Anyway, I went up with a view to them being a junior version of Countdown and me being the host of it, because I used to be a kids presenter to children's programs. And that didn't materialize. I think I did a pilot, didn't materialize. And it was then called Calendar Countdown. It was for farmers. It was for farmers. Farming people took part in it.
Right.
And it was great fun. And people like Kenneth and Ted Moult, Ned Sherrin, they're all gone now, were the people in Dictionary Corner. And I became the sort of new young boy on the block. And that's how I met Susie Dent so many years later, because she took over from the other people who'd been in Dictionary Corner. In those days, it was what was in your head, and they had a dictionary upstairs they were looking through. Now, all the dictionaries have been computerized, and so they want, understandably, to give the audience the longest words. They can see the potential.
Yes,
so
definitely.
they do, and they can speak, and they can help Susie look it up.
Yeah.
She doesn't need any help, as it happens. And occasionally, I don't need any help either. I can occasionally come up with quite a long word. And that's the pleasure of it. The pleasure of it is making the synapses work, making the connections, coming up with the word. That's fun. Learning new words is fun. I mean, there are people who play Scrabble. I'm the founder of the National Scrabble Championships. I founded that in 1971. It's still going strong. Global now. I'm the president of the Association of British Scrabble Players. No progress in my life in 50 years. No career development of any kind, but I'm still doing what I was doing with enthusiasm. And so I'm still a devotee of Scrabble. And I was taught to play Scrabble by an old man who lived to be 102. And I met him when he was 99. This man was called John Badley. Across the table, Tim, shake my hand. I don't know if we can get a shot of that. This man, you've shaken my hand, this man was a friend of Oscar Wilde. You have just shaken the hand that shook the hand
yes.
that wrote The Importance of Being Earnest.
Oh, there you go.
At one remove, I can give you Oscar Wilde. So this old gentleman, aged 99, played Scrabble with me, and he always won. And I said, look, sir, you're using words that are obsolete. He said they weren't obsolete when I first learned them. And he literally had been learning words in the 1870s.
Brilliant.
And there I was playing Scrabble with him in the 1960s. He lived to be 102 years of age.
I do think that we're not, again, another discussion I had with you, and I can't remember the name of the magazine. I think it's called The Oldie.
The Oldie.
The Oldie. We are not utilising old people enough in this country.
No, and we're making them retire.
Yes.
We're making people like magistrates and judges and things retire at 65 or 70.
And we're also shunning them a bit, and then we're also going, oh, look at what they said years ago. Oh, that's not PC now, we won't discuss it. I mean, it's like, yeah, of course it was, because that's what happened years ago.
Interestingly enough,
It's like,
some of what they were saying all those years ago is PC now, like my friend Lord Longford and what his views on pornography. But you're right. And in a way, I think we've just got to be more generous to all people. We've got to take on board, but some of the wisest and loveliest people I know are very old people. One of my role models is an old gentleman, though you wouldn't think it. He was old if you met him. You may have met him, Nicholas Parsons.
yes, I've met him.
Nicholas is the host of the radio show Just a Minute.
Yep.
Going for more than 50 years. I'm lucky enough to be a regular on Just a Minute. Nicholas and I first met 50 years ago. In fact, 51 years ago, at a Christmas party hosted by Fanny Craddock. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean by Fanny Craddock.
Yes, a TV chef.
TV chef. In fact, I mentioned her on your Sunday
Yeah,
brunch show because I
yeah.
remember describing her then because the young people were looking totally bemused. Who is Fanny Craddock? Who was she? What was she like? And I remember saying to one of them, well, she was a curious cross really between Mary Berry and Jeremy Clarkson.
Yeah.
Because she was a proper chef, but she was a bit butch. She was wonderful. She was a really nice lady. She had a husband called Johnny who wore a monocle and was delightful and appeared to drink a lot. Well, he did drink quite a lot. Anyway, I went to their Christmas party. I was invited, and Nicholas Parsons was there. Lionel Blair was there as well.
Yeah, well, the reason I talked to you about the Oldie is because you gave him a Lifetime Achievement Award or something.
We did.
Yeah.
And Lionel Blair was there, and I remember it was 1968, 69. The big film that year was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid,
Yeah.
which prompted my little joke, seeing Fanny Craddock and Lionel Blair. Oh, look, it's Butch Casserole and the One Dance Kid.
Hey,
Yay! Even my jokes are 50-year-old. There's been no progress of any kind. But the point is, I met Lionel Blair then. The other day, I gave him the Oldie of the Year award for having snap in his celery. That's what the award is for. And the reason that we gave it to him, I mean, I've known Lionel a long time, and he's obviously 90, he's been going around. Lionel Blair, I mean, I can name drop. I enjoy name dropping because I think I'm lucky to have met interesting people and it's fun talking about them. But Lionel Blair and I, over lunch, he was telling me people he'd met, he was saying, oh, Danny Kaye, didn't think much of him. Sammy Davis Jr., oh, I loved him. And then he told me, have you heard of Errol Flynn?
Yep.
You've heard of Errol Flynn?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Errol Flynn has joined the ranks of the great immortals. He's a bit like Marilyn Monroe. Mm-hmm. Anyway, he told me, Lionel Blair, he said, I made a movie with Errol Flynn's wife, Patrice. And I rather fancied Patrice. And I didn't realise that Errol Flynn was her husband. I thought, my God, I'm talking to a man who had the hots for Errol Flynn's wife, Patrice. And he then said, we went to a bullfight together. They were in Spain. We went to a bullfight together with, wait for it, Ernest Hemingway.
Wow.
That's something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I was sharing this story after lunch with a lovely lady who was the first person to have transgender surgery, famously in this country. Well, actually, she had it in North Africa. She's called April Ashley. Okay. She had been a merchant sailor when she was young. Indeed, she shared digs when she was a merchant sailor with John Prescott, became deputy leader of the Labour Party, now Lord Prescott. Some of this, I know a lot of what I say people think can't be true, but I'm inventing it as I go along. All this is actually true. If it wasn't, it would be very libelous indeed. Anyway, April Ashley changed her gender and from being a male to being a female. And she said to me after lunch, talking about Lionel Blair and Ernest Hemingway, she said, oh yes, Ernest Hemingway, and this will appeal to you with your dick pics. Ernest Hemingway told me I was the first woman to give him an erection just on the sight of me, which is quite intriguing. And particularly since she had been a man and was now a woman. And I said, oh, what was he like? Oh, she said he was fine. But I tell you the one I really liked. He was fun. The one I really liked was Albert Einstein.
Wow.
Albert Einstein.
That's amazing.
She said, I used to have lunch with Albert Einstein at Quo Vadis before I became a woman. Yes. Before I was, and she put it rather more delicately, before I was en femme. Isn't that marvellous? So for me, that's very exciting to know people who are alive and well and knew Errol Flynn, Ernest Hemingway.
Errol Flynn had rumoured to... shall I go down this
Yeah,
road?
yeah. You'd like to have seen his dick pics,
Yeah,
is the point we're trying to make.
apparently, yeah. Is that true?
We've got to that. This is the level of this. Now we know that why you tuned in. With a bit of luck, he'll be flashing his before the show is over. I will be sparing you mine.
Only the fourth day you get my dick pic. Let's talk about you being an MP. Shall we?
It's an easy segue,
Yeah,
isn't it?
it is. Yeah. It pretty much is. Why did you become an MP? Why did you decide to do that?
I wanted to change the world. When I was young, basically, I think I wanted to do all the things that I have done and that I do. When I was at school, and when I say there's been no development, there has been no development. I mean, I'm doing now what I was doing literally when I was 10, 11 or 12. In 1959, there was a general election. I was the candidate at my little school, and they had a mock election. I was writing for the school magazine. I was appearing in the school plays. Well, here we are, 60 years later, and I'm doing exactly the same things. I'm writing for the little magazines. I'm appearing in plays. I'm chatting away. I've been a politician. So nothing really has changed along the way. One of the things I really wanted to do, though, when I was young, was to change the world. And I used to say, when I was first interviewed when I did this television program in 1968, 69, The Sun interviewed me, and the headline was, I want to be a sort of Danny Kaye and then Home Secretary. That was my ambition. I wanted to be an entertainer, and then I wanted to be Home Secretary. And the reason I wanted to be Home Secretary is there were various reforms I wanted to introduce, principally, curiously, homosexual law reform. Don't ask me why I was interested in this, but from quite a young age, I belonged to an organisation called the Albany Trust. I was their youngest member, aged about 12 or 13. I think they were doubtful about taking me on board. And this was because in those days, in the 1950s and 1960s, it was homosexual acts between consenting adults were illegal. So I wanted the decriminalisation of homosexual acts. Even as a small child, I'd been fascinated by Oscar Wilde. And when I went to this school and met this old gentleman, the 99-year-old, who was the founder of the school, who had known Oscar Wilde, whose son had been to the school, Oscar Wilde's son, I was interested in all this when I was a young teenager. So I was interested in social reform. And in fact, my first book that I wrote about 48 years ago was called Created in Captivity. And it was a book about prison and prison reform. And when I was still at school, I began visiting prisons. I simply wrote to the governors. Age 16, I'd write a letter to the governor of Wormwood Scrubs. Dear sir, I'm a 16-year-old, this is my school, I would like to visit your prison, may I? And the governor would write back saying yes. And then, because I was doing French A-level, I wrote to prisons in France, and I was admitted to prisons in France. When I was at university, I went to Russia, and this was the time of the Soviet Union, and I was given access to visit prisons in Russia and in America. During my gap year, I visited a lot of prisons, spent some time on death row in Maryland and in Texas. These were very interesting, formative experiences for me, and I tried to write about them seriously in this book called Created in Captivity, which was about the beneficial effects of words and language, writing poetry, creating art, doing drawings and drama on prisoners, on their well-being, and on how to make them come out into the world and be easier and more at ease with the world, better at interviews, how to enable them to communicate better, how to give them... Anyway, lots of people were doing it. I just got into it, and it fascinated me. So that's why I wanted to be a member of Parliament. But we live in a world where you're only seen by what people see, understandably. So I am still the man in the funny jumpers. And that's fine by me.
TVAM, yeah.
TVAM.
Yeah.
I haven't worn a novelty jumper since 1990.
Right.
But coming here today to your home, Tim,
Yeah.
somebody said to me, "Oh, where's your woolly jumper?" I haven't worn one since 1990. It's because visual imagery is everything. People, you're the Sunday brunch guy.
Yeah.
I'm the woolly jumper guy. That's the way it is. We can't do much about it.
No.
Errol Flynn appears to be the big dick guy, in your view. We get people, we stereotype them, you know? That's the way it is. Diana Dawes is Diana Fluck. That's the way it goes. You can't get away from it. People didn't, when I put up to be a member, people, what's this fellow in the woolly jumpers from Just a Minute and from TVAM and from Countdown? Oh, he's going to be an MP. What's that about? But in fact, it was about wanting to change the world.
And why Tory? I say that. Have you been a lifelong Conservative?
My father was a Liberal. My father was a traditional Liberal. In fact, he was a Liberal candidate, I think, in the 1950s. But when I was quite small, I don't really remember that. My mother was probably a Conservative. They weren't really politically active. But I was always interested in politics. And I think instinctively, I've always thought it's never occurred to me to be anything but a Conservative.
See, I'm brainwashed by our industry because our industry is very left, isn't it? So I just assume the first time I heard that when I read about you being an MP, because I knew you're an MP, but then I actually read into it and I was like, wow, he was a Tory, he's Conservative. That's really shocking because our industry is so skewed left, don't you think?
Well, I don't know. Maybe it is. I try to view people as people.
Well, yeah, so do I.
But I still, I know.
Oh, I tell you what, I had Jeff.
But I have heard The Guardian is still going on. That's all. And I do see occasional copies of it around the office.
We had Jeff Norcott on this, right? And so Jeff Norcott, do you know him? He's the comedian who's he's a Conservative voting comedian, right way. And he was on this. And then I went away after doing it, and I spoke to some people. A producer I know said to me, "Do you know that's not an act?" I went, "What?" He goes, he actually votes Conservative.
Yeah.
And I went, "Yeah." He goes, "But he's not acting. That's what he actually..." It's so shocked, the idea that someone in the entertainment industry would vote on the right wing.
We have to accept that over the last 100 years, many more people have voted Conservative many more times than have voted anything else. If you look at the last 100 years, or indeed the last 150 years, people find this difficult to believe, particularly in London. People find it very difficult to believe. Still, they can't quite believe that more people voted for Brexit than against Brexit. People do find it difficult to believe. But I don't see myself, as it were. What's interesting is people say Conservative, they immediately then say Tory with the kind of Tory in their voices. I just happen to be a Conservative because I happen to be a Conservative and because I think I believe in less government and better government, and I think, I believe in the sort of the financial basis of it all. It makes more sense. Those happen to be my views, and I think it's the best way to achieve what would be my goals. But my views are actually the views of most middle-of-the-road British people. I just think probably the Conservative way is the more effective way of making it work. I have a daughter now, who I brought up all my children, as it were, apolitically, in the sense that they lived at home with us, but we have had a very comfortable middle-class English life.
Yeah.
We live in London. We live in the best part of the best city in the best country in the world. So if you want to be blessed, that's why I never complain about anything, because if anyone's, if I start complaining, then the world has gone to pot, because it's all fantastic. But anyway, my youngest daughter, Afra, is now, in fact, the prospective parliamentary candidate in Kingston and Surbiton. And people sometimes say to me, "Oh, what party?" And I say, "Well, the Conservative Party." And they're quite surprised. And then when they meet her, they're quite surprised as well. But that's just the way it is. The point is, normal people can be Conservatives too, but some of them keep quiet about it.
I'm a swing voter.
Oh, we know that. Not just a swing voter. Wait till you see those dick pics.
like
swinging by name, by nature.
Naked Martin. I swing. What do you think of politics at the moment? I was fortunate enough to go to PMQs once. John Bercow, the speaker, invited me, and I just found the whole experience. I thought it was slightly disrespectful to the electorate. Really,
It's
I just found it juvenile.
It's a knockabout occasion. The thing about
It's the idea. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
You. It's the idea that they're trying to tell jokes is the bit I don't get. It's
Well-
like, hold on, you're talking about our lives here. Theresa May, whoever's standing up there, stop telling jokes. I'm so sick of it.
What you've got to understand, unfortunately, Tim, is that Prime Minister's questions, PMQs, is not for you. It's for the people in the room. I mean that seriously. It's a very important occasion for the morale of each of the parties. And the reason for the knockabout and the jokes is because Mrs. May and Mr. Corbyn are trying to make their troops behind them feel that they are on top. And most of the time in Parliament, it's not a bear pit. If you go normally, there are not that many people there, and often there's some quite good debates and genuine exchange of views. But those occasions have become ones where you're pitting one person against. I mean, I agree with you that it's ridiculous. People have tried to change it. Jeremy Corbyn, when he became leader, all credit to him, tried to change it.
He did.
But he found it couldn't.
He couldn't. No.
And also, it was making the morale of his troops get lower and lower.
Right.
And they were sitting slumped thinking, this is embarrassing, Jeremy, it's embarrassing. So he had to decide to play the game. So they both get up with their pre-prepared lines, and it's done. It's a joust for the troops behind them.
Right.
I really recommend to you and to anyone who is new to politics to read what many people, particularly my wife, think is my only worthwhile book.
Okay.
And I've written a lot of books. This is a book called Breaking the Code, published by our mutual friend Ian Dale, a great podcaster, when he was at Bite Back Publishing. It's called Breaking the Code, Westminster Diaries. And it covers basically the period from the fall of Margaret Thatcher to the arrival of David Cameron. And it's a portrait of what it's like to want to be an MP, the process of being chosen, elected, arriving at the House of Commons like a new boy or girl at school, how terrifying that is, beginning to climb the greasy pole, getting into government, what goes on in the whip's office, fighting an election, being defeated, what the reality of government is. And it's a diary. And if you are, particularly actually, it's been interesting during the Brexit debate because, of course, this current period is in many ways a replaying of the 1990s, where both the parties, the main parties, again, have been completely divided on the European issue. So you get all of that, but it's about the reality of politics.
But I read, Tony Blair came into Prime Minister with the biggest majority ever, yeah. And I voted for him. I was excited about that prospect. I read his book after he'd retired and everything.
A Journey. It's called A Journey.
A Journey.
A Journey. In German, you know the German edition. In Germany, I was at Frankfurt Airport and I saw the German edition of Tony Blair's book. A Journey in English. In German, it's Ein Fahrt. Anyway,
but the only bit I remember of it really is the fact that he came into power and he had such great hopes because the public were behind him. We can make a difference, and he said very soon you realise not only the opposition, even if they agreed with you, would argue with you because there's a power game, but also your own party, obviously Gordon Brown, was putting knives in your back, and it's like the politicians don't help each other. This charade that's going on that you're saying getting the troops up and around, it's not good for us.
You know the famous phrase, towing the line.
Yeah.
You know, the origin of that phrase is said to be those two thin red lines on the floor of the chamber of the House of Commons.
Yes.
And you mustn't step over the line when you're speaking in a debate, otherwise you're ruled out of order.
Right.
You know, because you're not towing the line. You've got to toe the line. And those two thin red lines on the floor of the chamber of the House of Commons are exact distance apart of two outstretched arms and two outstretched swords.
Right.
So you see in the House of Commons, no sword fighting's allowed. No daggers, that's just complete. That's why members of Parliament don't shake hands with one another, because the origin of the handshake was to prove you came in friendship.
Right.
And because there was no dagger hidden in your hand, so to prove that you shook hands. Well, MPs never shake hands with one another because they don't have daggers in their hands. They don't need to prove it. No daggers, no swords. How seriously they take that is on the floor of the House of Commons. As Winston Churchill said, this is his famous dictum. So sword fighting is not allowed. Sword fighting is taboo. Sword fighting is strictly forbidden. Backstabbing, on the other hand, is quite a different matter. And that's Winston Churchill's famous dictum. Never confuse the opposition with the enemy. The opposition are the members of Parliament seated on the benches facing you. The enemy are the members of Parliament seated on the benches behind you.
Yeah. But it's not conducive to good I don't know.
It's conducive to collapse. Unless you actually stick together as a party, it is all over.
So your job was
disunited parties collapse.
your job was you're a whip.
I was a whip. Fascinating. It was the only time in my life I've ever been employed. The only time I've ever had a regular salary. I did it conscientiously. I was totally committed to being an MP. I loved being a whip.
So your job was going around convincing MPs who didn't believe in a policy to believe in it because they had to keep the party together.
Yeah, but it isn't as simple as that. Obviously, anybody who was a Conservative Member of Parliament or Labour Member of Parliament was elected because they were a Conservative or Labour Member of Parliament. So they were elected on a manifesto with a raft of commitments.
Okay.
So to come up later in the day and say, well, I'm not quite sure about this one, we could argue about that. But the real role of the whip, it's a kind of, yes, it's the secret police, but it's also the care of the community. It's also the people who take an interest in. There are 13 or 14 whips. Each of them has a group of MPs that they look after. And you're supposed to understand your people, your team, really well, to know all about them, to know what their hopes are, their fears, their personal problems, their ambitions, the causes they really have, where, they've been so true to this particular line, you're not going to get them to change their opinion, so that you understand them. So that's the job of the whip.
Who was PM when you were?
John Major.
Ah, nice man.
Very nice man. Very decent, good man.
He got a hard time, didn't he?
It was
spitting image.
It was that spitting image. I didn't buy my own puppet the other day.
Yes, I saw that on Twitter.
Yeah, went for £615. So
why didn't you get it?
I know. Well, £650, as my wife said. I've got the real thing. Do I want the rubber one? Anyway, back again to those picnics. Anyway.
So he got a hard time. How much did he? He must have struggled behind closed doors with that.
Well, he remained remarkably good-humoured and calm. He presided over a divided party. It was extraordinary. But he was very good at doing what Mrs. May does, which was keep his cards quite close to his chest.
But you get you're as a small boy, imagine he dreamed about becoming prime minister. Yeah. Eventually he makes it as prime minister, and then he's treated the way he's, underpants tucked in or whatever it was, and the grey puppet, and that must be horrible for you.
But he was prime minister for 7 years, and he actually did there were some good things that happened in his time.
You were responsible for one of them.
Oh, yes.
The 1994 Marriage Act.
Thank you. This is my claim to fame. When my obituaries are written, when it says on page 3 of The Sun, occasional Sunday brunch guest dies, jumper man
in
fondly
fluffy
remembered.
Jumpers, yeah.
What it ought to say is two things, really. In 1994, I introduced a private member's bill called the 1994 Marriage Act. This is the legislation that enables civil weddings to take place in venues other than register offices. Up until then, if you wanted a civil wedding, you had to get married in the local register office, town hall, county office, dull municipal building. In my constituency up in Chester, there was a lady called Mrs. Graybill who owned a castle, a small castle called Peckforton Castle. And she thought, well, they can have weddings in Chester Cathedral. Why can't they have weddings in my lovely little castle? And I thought, well, why not, actually? Not everyone wants to get married in church. And so I took this forward as a private member's bill and was successful. And as a result of it, you can get married in historic houses, castles, stately homes, amazing places. And so I do feel, well, in fact, I am responsible for one of the major changes in our legislation in the 1990s, the 1994 Marriage Act, that when my wife heard me being described once on local radio as, please meet Gyles Brandreth, the expert on the Marriage Act, she toppled out of her bunk laughing. My other contribution, I don't know if most of your viewers and listeners, I say viewers, viewer,
Hello.
Thank you, Mrs. Lovejoy, whether they live in London. But one day I was parliamentary private secretary to the Secretary of State for National Heritage. And their offices were in Trafalgar Square. And walking through Trafalgar Square one day, I saw the empty plinth. An empty plinth, nothing on it. And I thought we should put something on that plinth. And went in to the office and said to the senior civil servant, what's on that plinth? Nothing. Couldn't we have something on that plinth? And he made inquiries and said, well, the plinth has been empty since 1850 or something when Trafalgar Square was built. I thought, oh, let's have something on that plinth. And I thought it would be quite fun to have Mrs. Thatcher on the plinth. They didn't like that idea. Of course, I knew they wouldn't. I was just teasing, really. This has to be a military figure. I said, well, Mrs. Thatcher in her tank rolling over the Falklands. And I suspect that in the long run, who they will have on that plinth is the Queen, in her uniform of the Grenadier Guards, riding on one of her horses in the fullness of time. You have to be dead to be on a plinth in Trafalgar Square. So meantime, we came up with the idea of having a rotating series of artworks placed on that plinth.
Okay.
So I am responsible.
I've got one. Where is my one I've got?
Anyway.
My anti-Gormley one.
The thumbs
yeah.
up?
Yeah, hold on.
People love the thumbs up. That's okay.
Go and run and get... Thanks, Mark.
This is... People who are new to this podcast may not know that Tim actually has a Lovejoy. I mean, has a Lovejoy, forgive me, a love toy. Here it is. Here is his love toy.
This is it. Look at
this
that.
This is it. This is it. That's the plinth, and there it is. It looks like a sort of huge dildo, doesn't it? Now
No,
you
it
see
doesn't, Giles. It looks like a big thumb.
It doesn't. You are upset. This is
No,
as
you're
close as we get
obsessed.
to a dick pic in this show.
So tell me, you're
love it.
you're responsible for doing that.
Those are my...
That's a great idea.
My claims to fame, probably, from that period anyway,
Yeah.
are the 1994 Marriage Act, the plinth, and Breaking the Code, My Political Diaries, which is a portrait, in a way, of what happens in the whip's office.
You were just talking about Margaret Thatcher there. Did you know her?
Yeah. I got to know Mrs. Thatcher, a remarkable, whatever your politics may be, an amazing achievement to be the first woman Prime Minister. And to be a Prime Minister for so long. And rather as Tony Blair was swept in on a tidal wave of hope, and a lot of people voted for Labour and Blair who didn't normally. In the same way, Mrs. Thatcher came in on a tidal wave of hope, and a lot of people voted for Conservative and for her because they felt it was time for a change and wanted that. And I got to know her, and I liked her very much. I got to know when she was quite old. The only downside with Mrs. Thatcher, she had no sense of humour, No sense of humour at all. I always thought they must have made bringing up Mark quite challenging. Anyway, she was an interesting woman. The sadness for Mrs. Thatcher, and in a sense, it is one of the secrets of being happy, is to have a passion. And the sadness with Mrs. Thatcher was that her only passion in life was politics.
Yes.
She lived for politics.
Yeah, you talk about this in your book. Which we're
and when that was taken away, when she was denied that passion, when she ceased to be Prime Minister, she had really nothing left in her life. And then, particularly after her husband died, she became a sad person. In my book, I contrast her with the Queen, same age, they're born the same year. And the Queen, now 93, sustained by faith, as we know, driven by duty, as we know, but she is a happy person and living a full life because she has a passion. Her horses, as the Duke of Edinburgh once said, if it doesn't fart or eat hay, she isn't interested. But if it does, she is. Tim, what is your passion?
Well, do you know what it's doing this now? I was thinking about that when I was reading your book. It's definitely doing that. I think people. I say this to my podcast. People need 3 hobbies. You need one to make money.
Yeah.
You need one for exercise, and you need one to be creative. And I don't really have the creative one apart from I really enjoy doing this. And this has filled a massive gap in my life.
Yeah.
Mark and I started.
Yes, I'm afraid he had no one to talk to.
No one to
now
talk to.
Now he invites people in.
I do.
Lures them in.
I do.
He says, you can plug your book as long as you keep me company for an hour in my kitchen.
Exactly.
Because I've got rather a complicated relationship with my friend who is the soi-disant producer.
Exactly.
Is it a bromance that you have with him? What's he called, by the way?
Mark.
We don't see Mark very often. What? I love a word like bromance. It's a portmanteau word.
Which means combining 2 words.
It does.
Yeah.
Pioneered by who?
Don't know.
Lewis Carroll.
Brunch.
Brunch is not one of his, but it was invented almost in his lifetime, just after he died. 1895 gives us brunch.
What do you think about when they mix 2 names together to make one?
Oh, like Angelina Jolie and whatever it was called, Brangelina.
Yes,
when
Brangelina. Do you like that sort of thing?
That ended up badly, didn't it? I don't mind that. That's what I love about language. People think because I did this book called Have You Eaten Grandma that I'm a purist, in fact, I'm not. Language is constantly changing, evolving. That's the joy of Lex, that language is on a roll. So do what you like with it, as long as you communicate clearly.
Do you want my theory on Margaret Thatcher, by the way? I've got one. And we interviewed a really excellent guy on here called Mir Crigan. He's a sleep expert. And in the 70s, I think his 60s or 70s, he started getting a lot of patients who weren't sleeping well. So he started looking into it. And he's one of the guys who come up with sleep apnea and all that sort of stuff. And he was sitting right where you're sitting there. And he started talking about the fact that everybody needs between 7 and 9 hours sleep. That's kind of how much you need. And then I sort of said, what happens if you don't? He goes, well, you suffer a lot of illness. And he said, lack of sleep means you can suffer from dementia, and they link it to Alzheimer's and all these sort of things. And I said, famously, Margaret Thatcher would only sleep, and Ronald Reagan would only sleep 4 hours a night or something like that. Both.
Yeah.
And what, sorry?
Oh, is Trump a short sleeper?
Trump is firing off tweets all the way through the night. Anyway, Mir Crigan emailed me when he got back and sent me an article about Trump and how people are saying he gets petulant sometimes, and it's lack of sleep. You act like a small child when you're, and sometimes those tweets he's firing off in the middle of the night, having a go at a Hollywood star or something, they're ludicrous. But sleep deprivation does that to you. So what we should be doing with our politicians is saying to them, the first thing you do is put 8 hours sleep in your diary. However, what we want out of our politicians is you want them to do the Thatcher thing and not sleep, because they're working for the country.
Yeah, and that's one of the problems with being a politician, and one of the reasons that I find it, when I was a politician, I used to sort of help people like Mr. Major with speeches and things, and go to meetings, and I would say, well, why do we need new policies? Can't we make the ones we've got work? Let's have fewer policies. Let's make it that we are going to do less, but do it better.
Yes.
Oh, no. Then, and all the research shows this is true, then you'll be seen as being impotent, having run out of steam.
Yeah.
You've got to be seen to do things. And there was a very effective minister in Mrs. Thatcher's government called Peter Walker. And he famously told his civil servants, I need an hour a day in my diary on my own in the office for thinking.
Good.
And they thought this was a euphemism for sleeping. It wasn't. He required an hour just to think every day. He would take an issue and he would think, I'm just going to worry this a bit. I just want to think about this for a while. And people don't. They just rattle from one meeting to another meeting to another.
As you wrote speeches, you can help me with this as well. I interviewed Harriet Harman on here and I discussed that with her. I thought, or Alistair Campbell, I can't remember one or the other. And I said, why is it all leaders say I? It really annoys me. I'm going to do this. Theresa May said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I think, I don't want you to. I want your team to do it. I want it to be a we.
I agree.
And so why do they always write I? Is it so so the public think they're strong?
I think it is.
But it doesn't work for me.
There are all sorts of funny games that we play. I mean, I remember, visual imagery I know is important. And this was made, so now it's all about the photograph,
and
how you're
the way
seen,
they stand,
the way you stand.
George Osborne.
The visual imagery is everything, and how the firmness of how the voice comes across. And I do remember we having to explain to, maybe it was John Major, John, when you go up on, Prime Minister, wouldn't say John, Prime Minister, don't forget, when you get onto the plane, you've got to run up the steps. When you get near the platform, run onto the platform.
Skip.
To show that you've got bounce. You've got bounce. On we run.
Excellent.
And fun enough, and I still do it automatically to this day. I mean, I earn my living. I host a lot of awards ceremonies.
Yeah.
And I'm out several nights a week speaking, and I really enjoy doing it. But I always, as a matter of habit, I run onto the stage.
Do you?
And
I'll try that.
And for the photographs, I stand on tiptoes automatically.
Oh.
I just can't stop myself. It makes the shoulders go down, the tummy go in, the chin come out. You look like a winner. Oh. The creases in the shirt disappeared.
What are your good tips for speaking in public? Is it you don't say anything to begin with? Do you capture the room?
Take your time. Yes, don't start too soon. I have a son called Bennett Brandreth, who is a brilliant lawyer. He's a QC, and he's also a stand-up. He's got a show coming on soon at the Soho Theatre. I don't know what it is, anyway, look him up, Bennett Brandreth, and it may be sold out, but if not, catch it while you can at the Soho Theatre. He's very funny, 5 stars in Edinburgh, but he also writes novels about Shakespeare, and is an authority on rhetoric, the art of persuasion. People like Shakespeare at school, people were taught rhetoric, the way of speaking and arguing. And he and I have done an online course about public speaking.
Oh.
So I don't know if anybody wants it. It used to be about $300, but I think you can now get it for $1 and postage. Anyway,
Well,
so
go on,
what are the rules?
give
There's
us,
so
give us-
many rules.
Yeah, but give us a couple of golden tips because I want to talk about your book. So
Well, oh God, I want to go home.
I was going to say I'm
one
conscious
of,
of your
one
time.
of the tips, basically, is to take your time.
Yeah,
Take your time. It's a very difficult one. I mean, let the room settle down. Take your time. Get up there. Take your time. And remember, too, you don't need to rush it because we're used to a conversation. When you pause and there's silence because you're making a speech, automatically you feel anxious because nobody's replying, but they won't because they're sitting there to listen to you. So let that pause come naturally before you start again. So you don't need to rush it. And the real rule is say less rather than more. Leave them wanting more. This is my besetting sin. Stand up, speak up, shut up. They're the best 6 words, and that really is what you have to do. Sometimes people say, we want you to do 30 minutes or 40 minutes, and I do whatever I'm asked. But often, actually, 20 wonderful minutes would be better than 25 that aren't so wonderful. So it depends on the context.
right. I've talked about your book, so we've got to quickly do it. Are you okay to do 5 minutes on your book?
I'm okay to do 5 hours with you. It's just your viewer and your listeners that I'm
They'll
anxious
love it.
about.
You're entertaining them.
But also, some people may listen to this for insomnia. I used to listen to the BBC World Service to cure insomnia.
Well, I did some sleep. What did we call our sleep ones, Mark? We called them what? Nodcasts.
Nodcast, that's amusing.
Nodcasts. I just used to ring. I used to just read out names of England cricketers and things like that, and that, just long lists.
That
to
was
get
my
people
problem
to
with John Major.
sleep.
I didn't really know anything about cricket.
Yeah, he loves cricket, doesn't
And I do remember this is he did a sort of put up or shut up thing with the Conservative Party when they were making trouble, and he sort of stood down as leader, and they had to re-elect him. You've forgotten this. And the night before this, I was sort of sent in to sit next to him at dinner because I was a junior whip. And I sat with him, and I thought, this could be your last night as Prime Minister. And I thought, I can't think of a thing to say. I cannot think of a thing to say. And then, fortunately, in came a lovely man called Peter Brooke, who I think was Home Secretary, or was the Arts Minister. Anyway, he came in and sat down the other side of John Major, and he talked about cricket. And they talked about some famous cricket match from 1937. And I thought, this is perfect. This is a comfort zone. We all need comfort things. And for John Major, it's cricket. What's your comfort? Where do you come? I think for me, words, language, they're my comfort zones. Going to the theatre is, believe it or not, Shakespeare. I love Shakespeare. Do you go to Shakespeare plays?
No.
Yeah.
I've been.
That's because you've been. Go to a Shakespeare play. Don't worry about the first 20 minutes. You won't get it.
Right.
After about 20 minutes, you begin to get it.
Yeah.
And I love going to Shakespeare plays. For me, that's my comfort. So different people. So what, Tim Lovejoy, is your comfort?
Well, this is an interesting point, actually. I've suffered. I hate using the word suffered. I've had depression. I've had mental health issues, and this is one of the reasons we started this podcast. Is because I've read so many self-help books. I didn't want to do the drugs, so I started reading and going to therapy and all that sort of stuff. And I feel good now. I kind of feel the happiest I've ever felt in my life right at the moment. But I go through peaks and troughs. But when I was reading your book, I thought it was the beginning of the book is just great stories and stuff like that. At the end of it, you've got your 7 secrets. Yeah. And sadly, I go through a lot of them thinking, I'm not sure I have, cultivate a passion. Yeah. I think this is my passion at the moment. I really enjoy it.
And the good thing about this passion, and it's worth, since we're trying to share helpful things with people who are listening, you need a passion that goes beyond your work, because work ends, as in Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah.
Whereas this you can do till you're a little wizened old man.
Hopefully.
Oh, no, you can, even if no one's listening, even if only your children, your grandchildren are listening.
True.
You can still keep chatting away, and there'll be new podcasts will have gone into different realms. So it's a lovely passion.
Well, I did one with Neil Woods last week, and he's an ex-undercover copper for the drug squad who wants to legalise drugs, and he's completely changed my mind. I've read his book, basically. When I read his book, it changed my mind, and the podcast was just sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Confirmation is exactly the word I'm looking for. He confirmed all the theories to me, and everybody's jumped on it and gone, this is a really good idea. He knows all about it. Stuff like that. Now, I'm not only am I finding out for myself, but I'm also giving it to an audience. It's just so rewarding.
Yeah.
No money in podcasts, but this is so rewarding. So it's kind of
You're
a passion.
telling me, but there is a box of chocolates.
There
So
you
if he
go. You
asks-
made a box of chocolates.
So cultivate a passion is an important one. Yeah.
Don't
And that
resist.
can be anything. It can be playing golf. It can be singing in a choir. It can be anything.
Would I ruin it if I quickly
No,
run through them all?
absolutely not.
Be a leaf on a tree.
Yeah, people find that. Well, really, what does that mean? Is this tree hugging? What's going on there? What it means is this. Everybody is individual. Everybody is unique. You're unique. I'm unique. Every tree in the world is unique, and every leaf on every tree is unique. And a leaf off a tree, when it floats about a bit, it feels free. That's quite exciting. But quite quickly, it floats to the ground and it dies. We need to be leaves on a tree, attached to an organism that is larger than ourselves and still growing. And that's the problem for you if you're elderly and living alone. If you're alone in your kitchen here, just you, well, you've got your little friend Mark here, this bromance. But it's a little bit sad, down in the kitchen, the pair of them.
Yeah.
You need to be a leaf on a tree. And at the moment, you are the tree of Sunday Brunch. It's growing. You're part of a team there. You go in every week. And it's growing and it's exciting. You need to be a leaf on a tree. And for people, that can be anything. It could be a school, a community, choir, golf club. It can be an extended family. You need to be a part of something that is growing and that is bigger than yourself. That is vital. And what's interesting about these 7 secrets, one of them is not enough. You need to have all of them.
Yeah.
It's not pick and mix. It's the whole package.
Yeah, you're right. So that got me thinking as well. Then we've got Break the Mirror,
that's-
which is just...
Which is the one that young people find. One that is for older people is challenging is being a leaf on a tree because people are more isolated when they get
Yeah.
older, and that is a problem. The younger people find Break a Mirror more difficult simply because we've turned our world into the selfie society. We're looking at ourselves all the time.
Yes.
Forget it. Tim, nobody's interested in you. Do you know that? Nobody is interested
You know
in
what? We do a podcast where we do a mailbag, and I always do my little pearls of wisdoms, and that we pick three random words, and I have to think of something interesting about it. And hair came up, and I said, if you're having a bad hair day, remember, no one cares. You care, no one else, because everybody is busy thinking, I think they might care about me.
Yes.
But actually nobody cares about anybody. Nobody cares.
You may hope that your children in time will, and I've discovered over the years, yes, your children maintain an interest in you, and you will continue to get a birthday card, but it's only if your daughter-in-law remembers.
All right, and then this one is kind of the one that a lot of people talk about, but it's so important. Live life in the moment.
Yeah,
That is a really important
it
one.
is. Actually, it really is, and you can change from moment to moment. And it's worth almost going through a door, as you go through a door, thinking, actually, this is going to be a good evening. I'm going to walk in, and I'm going to enjoy this. Savor the moment. Because one of the reasons I got into this was through a very wise man called Professor Anthony Clare, who's a psychiatrist. And he introduced me to the works of Carl Jung.
Yes.
There's rain
Yes,
coming
if you
down. It's
want
quite
to know what that-
exciting, isn't it? We're savoring the moment of the rain.
Yeah.
Carl Jung did research, and he discovered, looking back at all his patients, the ones who were happiest were the ones who were most outward-looking, the ones who looked out at the world, who enjoyed the world around them as nature, art. Enjoy what's happening to you, the taste of the water, the taste of the chocolate, the presence of a person. Enjoy the here and now.
I find that that's becoming a very tough thing for me to do with my mobile phone. I have to put it in another room if I want to, even if I want to read a book or watch some TV. Otherwise, I pick it up and start looking
Constant
at it.
distraction.
It's pathetic. I
Well,
literally
that's
have no
also because we get, as you
concentration.
know, a little adrenaline rush with ticking. That's why people love making lists. I like making lists too.
Do you?
There's a little sort of endorphin when you tick things on a list.
Yes.
So make a list and go tick, tick. Oh, that feels good. And checking your, sending a tweet. Oh, it's a little bounce. So we are sort of a little hooked on these little
Yeah.
sudden moments.
Your book, it's a short book, isn't it?
It's actually published by Short Books.
Is it? Oh, it's a very short book. I really thought it, as I say, I picked it up and read it in one sitting. I love all the stories in there. There's some really great stories about celebrities and different things in there as well. So it's all good. Thank you, Gyles, for doing the podcast. I've just got questions to ask everybody.
Fire away your questions. I haven't really asked all of mine. But you're in a reasonably happy place now, are you? What's your secret to happiness, by the way? What didn't I have on my list that you would have had on yours?
Okay. It's acceptance. Was that on there?
No, I think acceptance is very good.
So my acronym to get through life is ARM, which doesn't work as an acronym, as everyone always points out to me, but it's accept, then take responsibility, and move on. And it's the one that I always think of. So if anything happens to me...
very good. Really catchy. Yeah. Maybe you should have it done as a tattoo.
So that's the way, and that's been one of the most helpful things.
Yeah.
Megan Hine came on the show, and she's a survivalist, one of those people who goes up into the mountains or into the jungle. And her point always is, if you break your leg and you're in the jungle, if you go, oh, woe is me, I've broken my leg. Oh, why does this always happen to me?
Yeah, accept it.
You die. No, the thing is, you die because nature doesn't care how old you are or how much money you've got or what color you are or what sex you are. So you've got to accept it and get yourself out of that mountain, down the mountain or out the jungle, or you'll die.
Well done.
So that really resonated with me.
Suck it up and get on.
So accept the situation you're in. You get a parking ticket, accept it. You know, anything which happens in your life, you've got to try and accept it. And I think that's been the most helpful thing for me.
Fortunately, I don't get parking tickets because I believe in the parking angel.
What's the parking angel?
When you next get in your car and you want somewhere to park, just speak to the parking angel. You'll find somewhere to park is provided. It works.
What do you mean? You pray?
And then at the end of the day, well, I'm not asking you anything as complicated as that, because I'm dealing with you, Tim. But what I mean is...
I'm not tapping any more Marmite, I'm sorry.
That was good. That was a fun one, wasn't it?
That was brilliant.
But... No, I tell you what. Part of that is I found a very good new way to go to sleep, and I do now count my blessings at the end of the day, good things that have happened.
Oh.
Just accept the day, and then as I go to sleep, I think I've got at least to have three things, and you'll be one of my blessings today. How amusing!
Thank you.
Seeing Tim and meeting his. Mark is amusing partner in the old-fashioned sense of the phrase. No, it's nice. You count your blessings.
I did this thing, and I talked to Dr. Stephen Peters about this, and he thought I was nuts. But I thought on average, like 6 or 7 bad things happen to me a week. So I'd make a note of them. I'm doing it the reverse. I made the note of them. So when something bad happened, I went, yeah, 6 or 7 things happened to me. So if it was less than 6 or 7, I was like, what a great week. But if 6 or 7...
This is totally the wrong approach. Nothing. How could anything bad happen to you? You're one of the most blessed people on the planet Earth. One of the most gifted and one of the luckiest. Nothing bad happens to you.
Gifted.
But if you start counting... The other day, I was in Windsor.
Yeah.
And I got to Windsor, Eton Windsor Station, and I didn't know how to get back to Barnes. And there was this nice guy who was the train inspector.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, yes, your pass will get you onto that. Yeah. And he said, well, if you have a pass, you don't look old enough. I said, oh, thank you, I've got a pass. And I said, well, it doesn't go to... He said, what you have to do is you change at Staines. And he looked it all up for me. And I thought, oh. So I mean, no, seriously, I'm tearing up just thinking about that man. But the point is, he transformed my day.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So these things are happening to us all the time. Stop counting nothing bad has ever happened to you. What on earth bad could have happened to you? Honestly.
Let's go on to your questions. Gyles, what one piece of advice would you like to give our listeners that has been invaluable to your life?
Clear your diary for the afternoon when you're coming on the podcast, because you may not get to your next appointment. No. I have 2 sort of screensavers.
Yeah.
One is a quotation from the book of Proverbs. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. And poverty will come upon you like a vagabond, and want like an armed man. So that is a message to you.
Yeah.
Just keep at it. The three most important words in the English language, and I was introduced to this on the radio. I was listening to the radio, and there was a program about why Woolworths had failed. Remember Woolies?
Yeah.
All over the world, there were Woolworths. It doesn't exist anymore. And the fellow on the radio said there are three words, the three most important words in life and business. And I thought, well, yes, what are they? And he didn't say. We were coming to the end of the program. I thought, oh, for fuck's sake, one of these three words. And he kept referring to them. He said, well, Woolworths would still be going strong if they just obeyed the simple rule, those three fundamental words that everybody understands to make their lives work, to make their business work. You've just got to remember those three words. And it was literally, the clock was ticking up to 6 o'clock. We thought, oh, fucking hell, where are these three words? And then literally, as it was about to go beep, 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 he spat out the three words. Don't dabble, focus.
Oh.
And you may think that's odd coming from him, given that I've spent my life doing all sorts of things, writing books, writing murder mysteries, appearing on television, on radio, being an MP. I spent my whole life dabbling. But in fact, I try to focus on whatever I'm doing while I'm doing it. And in a way, it gets back to your living in the moment.
Yeah.
Don't dabble, focus if you can.
What's the biggest mistake you made?
Well, it would seem a bit personal, and in fact, I don't really regret it because meeting Mark has been enjoyable.
He's a nice guy, isn't he? He's a nice fella.
I don't know, and if I did, would I say, if I could think of one? Possibly not. Okay. I have a rule, or no, maybe I have a rule, I have an instinct that wipes out the bad things. I'm shocked, genuinely shocked by you saying, and I don't know if it was a joke or if it was for real, that you make a list of the bad things that have happened to you in the week.
I used to, yeah. I've changed that.
I'm glad you don't. Because obviously bad things must have happened to me. What bad things have? Forgive me. Sorry, lots of bad things have happened to me. The day we're doing this, because it's live, so people will know the day, happens to be the anniversary of the death of my oldest friend from school, an actor some people will remember still, called Simon Cadell, who was in Heidi High.
Yeah, I remember him.
Who died on the 6th of March in 1996. So, so bad things do happen. I have a sister who died and a brother who died. Of course, my parents died. Bad things happen to everybody. And I must have made loads of mistakes. Embarrassing speeches, poor decisions, things that didn't quite go wrong. Right. But I hope one learns from them and moves on.
But I suppose the reason why I was looking at the bad
Sometimes
things
people
that
say to me, wear your jumpers, your worst mistake, because you're now seen as the man in the woolly jumpers. And I think to myself, well, I had a lot of fun out of the woolly jumpers. People remember the woolly jumpers. They were fun. And at one stage, I was the director of a company. We had 31 wool shops around the country. And I produced lots of hand knitting books about I've enjoyed it. So, and the V&A would like to have one of my woolly jumpers for their costume collection. And apparently there's going to be a display of retro of my woolly jumpers one day. So actually, we all have life. People do. Of course, we make mistakes, but
I think looking at the bad things which happened to me was just a forerunner for me for my theory on acceptance. It was like something bad's happened, accept it, and that I think that's why it happened.
I hope I've accepted my mistakes, learnt from them, and moved on. And I hope people will forgive me for not digging deep to find what they are. But there'll be things to do with thoughtlessness or unkindness. Funnily enough, I am now politically correct. And a few years ago, when the political correctness thing began, I'm somebody, I've been telling stories and talking in public for 50 years. I was the support act to Bernard Manning in the 1970s.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've heard the worst that can be told. He was very funny, but totally unacceptable. And a few years ago, I was doing a turn and I realized the room was going tremendously well, but afterwards I met somebody and clearly I'd upset them by some casual remark I'd made. And I thought, well, actually, there were 900 people laughing, but one wasn't. Wouldn't it be nice if we could have 901 people laughing? Find a way to do that. Mm-hmm. So I probably made mistakes in my time by not being thoughtful enough. And sometimes it's difficult on the hoof to be as thoughtful as you should be.
Any life hacks?
What?
Life hacks.
Things that you find irritating. Yes,
No,
people...
life hacks, which are things that tips to help people.
Oh,
like,
no. I wouldn't presume. Well, except I've got my 7 secrets of happiness. I wouldn't presume. I would presume. I know all the answers. Actually, I don't. I find now my grandchildren. One of my grandsons said to me the other day, "I know everything, Grandpa.
Really?
I know everything." I thought, oh, marvellous to be someone who knows everything. As the years have gone by, I find I know less and less about more and more.
Yeah.
So I've got things that annoy me. People speaking when they phone you with their mouths full. I mean, sorry, what is that about?
Yeah.
Please do not phone me. Oh, all right, well, I better take this now. Sorry. I don't like people who speak with their mouths full.
All right, what's it like being famous?
I wish I knew.
Oh, come on.
I'm slightly well known. No, it's not, actually where I am is a very good place to be because I am. I'm slightly well. I'm sort of. If you know who I am, you know who I am, and if you don't, you half know who I am. So I did have someone saying to me, literally as I was going into the barbers. You may wonder, why do you need to bother to go to the barbers? You need to trim what you've got. I went into the barbers on Sunday, and as I was going in, a fellow followed me in saying, "Love your work." Then we had to sit down and wait for the barber to be ready. And after a few moments, he leant over and said, "Actually, what do you do?"
Oh, brilliant. Why do
Love your
why do
work.
people
What do you
that?
do? So it's fine. It's fine being slightly well known. It's lovely.
2 more questions. Can you
What's
recommend?
interesting is that in this country, people are hugely courteous. I was on the Underground the other day with Joanna Lumley, who's
Really?
a friend of mine, who is on the Underground.
What were you
on
doing
the
with
tube.
her on the
We were
Underground?
just travelling from Finsbury Park into the West End on the tube together. And, of course, everyone knows who Joanna Lumley is. She's famous, world famous.
Yeah.
Few people said hi. Nobody disturbed her. She said, "I'm on the Underground all the time." Nobody disturbed her. People are very... I've been on the Underground with Cliff Richard. Been on the Underground with Kenneth Williams, of course. I've actually been on the Underground once with the Queen, but people did notice. And she was opening the Jubilee line.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think it was the second or third time she'd been down on the Underground.
2 more questions. Can you recommend a book?
You know, the funny thing I wrote a book about the Queen. And the amazing thing was, the really amazing thing about being the Queen is, she gets onto an aeroplane, she sits down, and the plane takes off. She's got no idea about the stores to manual. She's had not the least idea. No one tells her to put on the seatbelt. She just sits down, and the plane, like getting into a car, and it moves. She sits down the aeroplane, off it goes. Wonderful.
Can you recommend a book, Giles?
Can I recommend a book?
Just one.
Well, I will recommend, since we talked about diaries, I love diaries. I keep a diary every day. I publish 2 volumes of diaries. We mentioned my one called Something Sensational to Read in the Train, which is a line from Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest. Cecily says it, why she keeps a diary. One must have something sensational to read in the train. And the Breaking the Code. I like reading other people's diaries. I'm reading the diaries of Sir Roy Strong at the moment and loving them. Virginia Woolf's diaries.
Sorry, who's
Sir Roy Strong is an art historian. He was the youngest ever director of the National Portrait Gallery, later the youngest ever director of the Victorian Albert Museum. Marvellous moustaches, great style, a big figure in the 60s, 70s and 80s. A delightful human being, very gossipy, very witty. So I'm reading his diaries and loving it. Because basically I live in the past. I'm not very good at the present day. I've not really moved on much from when I was 16. In fact, I haven't moved on at all from when I was 16.
Okay.
And when I was 16, I wanted to be in the 1890s, and I still would rather be in the 1890s. The 21st century is not for me. I do not wish to learn another frigging password.
Yeah, exactly. Jesus.
Oh.
I agree with you on that.
So, the diaries of Virginia Woolf, the great novelist, English novelist. You've heard of Virginia Woolf.
Yep.
Don't be afraid of Virginia Woolf. Some of her novels, some people find difficult, including me. Her diaries are accessible. There's a shortened version of her diaries. Dip into any page. There's wit, there's wisdom, there's a wonderful woman's view of the world.
And the final question, what is the meaning of life?
I was hoping you would tell me.
I don't know.
That's where I came. None of us do know, and none of us knows what the future holds. So the meaning of life is trying to get on well. And I tell you the reason that we gave Lionel Blair this award as Oldie of the Year. It was because on the day I was making an episode of a program that he used to do called something like Give Us a Clue. Mm-hmm. It was charades on television, hosted by Michael Parkinson, I think. And
Michael
Aspel.
Oh,
Michael.
Definitely Michael Aspel, but did Michael Parkinson do it?
I think he took over. Anyway, never mind. It was somebody doing it. And one of the team captains was Lionel Blair, and I was on Lionel's team. And it was on the day that we were recording that Fred Astaire died. Mm-hmm. And Lionel, if you know him, he's now 90, is a hoofer. And he cries very easily. And, of course, he worshipped Fred Astaire. Who doesn't? Fred Astaire dancing is one of the most beautiful things in the history of the world. If you want to lift your spirits, even if you've never heard, if you want to be happy, go to YouTube and look up some guys called the Nicholas Brothers. Okay, you do this later.
Okay, I will.
Add this to the end of this podcast, please. The Nicholas Brothers. Watch the Nicholas Brothers dancing, and your spirits will soar.
Okay.
Fred Astaire, the greatest dancer in the world. The Nicholas Brothers, the greatest pair of dancers in the world. Lionel Blair hears this news, bursts into tears. He can't go on. He disappears to his dressing room. We're in the middle of recording a show, but word has reached the floor. Anyway, he's persuaded out eventually, and he comes out with the slap being padded together, and he comes back, and even though he's broken by this news that Fred Astaire is dancing, he says, I know, I apologize, ladies and gentlemen, I was very moved, but I know the rule. And the rule is the show goes on, and that is the meaning of life.
Yeah.
The show goes on.
Okay. Thank you, Gyles, so much for doing the podcast today. I thoroughly enjoyed your company. To do a quick plug, you've got loads of books out. You can look all those up. But you're also going on tour.
Oh, yes, I am.
You're doing your tour.
Oh, come to see the show in Harrow. It's sold out almost everywhere else, but it isn't sold out. Harrow seems to be sticking a bit, but everywhere else
I'd love to.
It's a bit sold out.
And you go on tour on the 30th of March, the day after Brexit. So will you be discussing that on the... No.
I guarantee 2 Brexit-free hours. In fact, if I mention Brexit, I give them their money back. People will have had enough of it by then.
Okay.
I promise you. It's break a leg. It's funny old stories about show business, all the extraordinary people that I've been lucky enough to meet. You may feature in my next show.
Oh.
Lovejoy.
Lovejoy.
Such a good name. What's your real name, by the way?
That is my real name.
No, come on.
Yeah.
Come
no,
on.
it is.
Is that the question you're most often asked?
No.
Apart from the one.
Why'd you leave Soccer M is the one. I did a show called Soccer M for years, which was, and people just, why'd you leave Soccer M? That's the one they always ask me.
What was Soccer Round about?
Soccer AM.
Oh, so it was a football
Soccer
program.
AM, yeah, it was soccer, it was football, and it was
Shake
in the
my hand.
morning.
Shake my hand. I've shaken the hand of Stanley Matthews. Now that is iconic, isn't it? That is
good,
epic.
yeah.
Younger viewers and listeners may not know who Stanley Matthews was, but he was, in his day, the greatest English footballer, wasn't he?
I'm going to start doing this for people. I'm going to start going, shake my hand.
Exactly.
I've shaken
Stanley
that.
Matthews.
Got
And
to
what was
work out
interesting?
who's famous.
It was on his 80th birthday.
Yeah.
It was, and one remove, then you met everybody.
Yeah.
On his 80th birthday, it was a fundraising evening, and we showed clips from his golden moments, all the great goals he scored, and he wouldn't look at the screen.
Why?
He'd broken the mirror. He genuinely wasn't interested.
Ah, good idea.
Yeah.
Gyles, thank you very much. If you want to follow Gyles on Twitter, which you should do because he's always putting up good stuff on there. What is it, Gyles?
It's at Gyles with a Y, Gyles B1. Gyles B1, because Gyles Brandreth was taken by some turnip somewhere.
Some nobody.
Well, yeah, exactly. They don't seem to use it. Why have they taken it if they don't want it?
I don't know.
Maybe they just worship a little secret person. One person with one follower, and it's themselves.
Can't you ask Twitter to get it?
It's too complicated.
You've got your name.
Getting the blue thing
Tick.
took about 2 years. Didn't understand how that worked. In the wash.
Gyles, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And if we want to listen to your podcast, how do we find it? How do I find you?
I'll send you a link.
You
watch it on YouTube or it's on iTunes. It's everywhere. SoundCloud, a lot.
SoundCloud, everywhere.
Good luck with your podcast and say hello
Thank
to
you.
Susie Dent.
I will do.
All right.
And tune in now to the Nicholas Brothers, and your
Nicholas
spirits
Brothers.
will soar.
We'll do that. Cheers, Gyles.